Well, today I'm having a totally different experience than I did just a few days ago. A few days ago we woke up to snow and it was freezing. So of course I thought Scotch and peated Scotch. But today it's gorgeous. It's warm. For us it's plus 20, which is just great Alberta weather. But it made me think of a bourbon, which is fitting in my series. So today I'm going to be talking about Maker's Mark classic bourbon. Alright, so today we're talking about Maker's Mark. You can always recognize Maker's Mark because of the wax on the top. And I won't be out here long because I'm in my front yard and I'm not sure you can drink in the front yard. But I'll do a quick pour and some thoughts. I don't know the age statement on Maker's Mark. I should look it up. But it's 45% alcohol by volume. It's a bourbon, so that means it has at least 51% corn. I'm quite sure the corn, the mash bill in this bourbon is much higher than that, and I'll look that up too and post it in the notes. But to be a bourbon in the States, it has to age for a few years, has to be in new oak, and has to have minimum 51% corn in the mash bill. And that's a little difference between Canadian whiskeys and American bourbons and scotches. Canadian whiskeys are often have their grains aged separately, right? So you've got corn, you've got wheat, barley, any grain that you're going to use will age in its own barrels and then gets mixed. Sometimes then the mix is aged a little bit to cure, but often it's just blended and then that's released. Whereas in the US, all of the grains will go into the initial mash, and then they'll get distilled and aged together. So one of the neat things though with Maker's Mark, it's often called a wheater. The reason for that is a really common bourbon mash bill is corn mostly, and then a bit of rye to give it some spice, and then barley to smooth it out. Whereas this Maker's Mark is, as I said, a wheater, so they replace the rye with winter wheat, and so it tends to be a bit smoother, maybe a little sweeter, because it doesn't have that rye spice that often creeps up on the sides of your tongue or in the finish. So anyways, you can see the color. I'm kind of caught in the sunshine here. It's a nice color. You can kind of see it there. I'll give it a nose. You know, bourbon for me on the nose, just lots of caramel notes, just tons of it. You know, maybe vanilla. Not sure what other sweetness is going on there. Those are my two go-to. A little toffee. Oh man. But nice, inviting. Not doesn't put off. Even though it's 45%, doesn't really feel like a lot of alcohol. I'll give it a quick taste. Yeah, and with a wheated bourbon like that, just really smooths right out. I find this is an excellent bourbon to try. I came to it, it's one of the first 2 or 3 bourbons that I had after really exploring Scotch for a few years. And there it is, oak. I don't know if I'm the only one, I can't be the only one. But I find when I'm talking between Scotch and bourbon and Canadian whiskey, even though I really do need to look up the age statement. I'm going to guess between 6 and 8, and it's a total guess. But it's in that new oak, and it's aged down south, and I just find it just picks up that oak. I often find when I'm drinking a bourbon, after corn, because I totally get corn, after that, I just get wood. I get kind of a new wood, a popsicle stick wood. I've often said, if I have bourbon and nothing else that night, drink a little bit of bourbon. I feel like I've been chewing on a popsicle stick. Like I've had a popsicle and I finished and I've just left the stick in there for a little bit. You take it out in your mouth, it has that mouthfeel after, like, oh boy, I had wood in my mouth. And that's how I often find bourbon, even a young bourbon. I think the oldest bourbon I've ever had would have been a 12-year-old. So I haven't had any of those old Pappy Van Winkles or any of that old stuff. I can't imagine how they taste in oak. Although, age is a tricky thing, because I find that the wood notes pronounce stronger in Maker's Mark than even like Elijah Craig, which is a 12-year, probably twice as old as this. But I really find the wood just stands up in this one. Other than that, a little bit of bready notes. I don't know. Very smooth. Well, okay, very smooth, except I can taste the alcohol. I can feel it around in my mouth. Not as smooth as some older. Mostly now I'd be comparing to scotches. Some of those just are unbelievable. Whereas this is just good. It's good drinking, good flavor profile, not terribly complex. Because it's not terribly complex, really, it's not that it's one-dimensional. It's got a few things going on, but I'm not intrigued by it. I enjoy it, I like it, but I'm just not pulled in. And so I tend to give Maker's Mark somewhere between 3 and 3.5 stars, depending on my mood. But having said that, I almost always recommend it to someone who's never tried a bourbon. It's quite approachable, it's quite available. In our neck of the woods, it often goes on sale. So I keep it on the shelf. I definitely recommend having it. I definitely recommend going out and getting it. But it doesn't really change your world. So a solid 3.5 stars, and that's about all for Maker's Mark for me. Well, no one's told me to get off my porch, so I'll have a little more to say. When I think about the whiskey industry and I think about bourbon and scotch, I'm excited that everyone's excited about it, right? That I can find podcasts, I can find YouTube channels like this, other shows. It's great. A concern I have is what's going to happen to the price of our scotch and bourbon and whiskey. Right now, I can still get some pretty good drinking material. For in Canada, we're talking, it's almost all about $50 now. Every now and then things will drop, and you can get it just below 40, but nothing less, and that makes it tough. So I definitely try to drink things that are affordable because I want to share this passion with others. One day I hope I can afford some really old things and unique things, but right now I just want to encourage the industry, and I want to get into some local distillers if I can. So another call out, anybody local who's aging spirits in wood, get a hold of me. I'd love to taste it. I'll do a review of that Last Mountain one that I had in Saskatchewan. But just an encouragement. Let's keep looking for releases that regular people can afford. This is a wonderful thing. It's a relaxing, it's a beautiful day. This doesn't get any nicer than this. And to be able to do this, a regular person being able to splurge a little bit and get a $50, $60 bottle, that's awesome. But if you're going into a nice liquor store and you got to put out over $100 for a bottle worth drinking, that's a problem. So just encouragement, guys. If you can, anybody, if you can, tell me about good stuff that's $40 to $50. And Maker's Mark is right in there. It's often on sale. Yeah, I better go in. I've had a few looks from my neighbors, so I'll make this a short podcast. Just a call out, if you are in the area of St. Albert, Alberta, it's just above Edmonton, you got to check out the 3 liquor barns that are closing because the owner is clearing out his spirits. And like I said, this Maker's Mark is now pushing 50 and had it on for $29. So really good time. I just talked about price to be looking for whiskey. Other than that, like the review, share it with friends, subscribe please. I'm just getting going, but now my profile. Actually, I like bourbon, so it's not a very accurate profile, but because I only give this three or 3.5 stars, and I really like bourbon actually, but it's a solid choice. I'd recommend it. Thanks for watching. It's the Whiskey Neighbor. Like me on Twitter, follow me on YouTube. Thanks. Bye.